Clarita Valley. Welcome back to SCV Sheriff Talk, where twice a month we talk about outreach, public safety, and what's going on in our community with our friends from the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff Station with my co-host, Shirley Miller. How's it going,
Good
Shirley?
morning, Perry. It's good. How are you?
Good, good. We have a
serious
kind of a
topic
serious,
today.
somber topic
Yes.
today and a few friends in the studio, so I want to first introduce our guests. Deputy Wilkinson, you work with the Crime Impact Team for the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff Station, correct?
Yes.
And we have Deputy Romo, who is the School Resource Officer for Valencia High School and Rio Norte Junior Highs.
Yes.
And Dr. Janet Steyer, who is joining us from the Santa Clarita Valley Child and Family Center.
Yes, good morning.
And you are a childhood psychologist, or you specialize in childhood psychology, right? So
Yes.
We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with active shooter preparation in the Santa Clarita Valley. Basically what happened in
this
the news,
topic has
obviously.
really come to light. It's been on a lot of people's mind this last week.
Obviously, with the tragedy around Orlando and what happened, there was an active shooter that killed 50 people in a nightclub and more injured, and we're still worried about them. But we also want to prepare and know what can happen and know that the Santa Clarita Valley, there are drills in place, there are safety measures being exercised. And we'll talk a little bit about that and spread some information about that so people know and understand, and they can have the responsible conversation around the topic and know what needs to be discussed and what we can get out there. So can we talk first, Deputy Wilkinson, a little bit about what's going on in the Santa Clarita Valley as far as what does the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff Station do? You work primarily with training other law enforcement officers regarding active shooting situations.
Yeah, I have a collateral.
Among your other responsibilities, sorry.
Yeah, dealing with instruction of active shooters type scenarios, things like that. Station level, we handle trainings throughout the various schools, mostly during the summer months when the schools are empty, so that we can utilize the facility, get a lay of the land, that kind of thing, and then familiarize the other deputies throughout the station with each of the schools when we get to use them.
So for like the larger businesses, would they contact you? Like, as I'm thinking of a few places that we both know of where people gather in large groups up here. Do they work with you on training? Do they contact? How does that coordination go with the sheriff's station?
If a business was interested, I would believe they would just contact the sheriff's station.
Right. That's I've even received calls myself, Perry, from communities or different camp summer programs, and they want to know how they can prepare their staff for an active shooter situation. And in those cases, I usually refer them to our training and scheduling office. Deputy Mike Sellers, he is in there and he helps coordinate the deputies for these trainings.
And how has this, I would imagine there's been a lot more information and a lot more situations you guys have been able to study and learn from in the last few years. Has the training changed, or does it evolve? And you guys look at it every year, right?
Yeah, it definitely evolves throughout each incident that occurs throughout the nation, the world, definitely changes the way the training and tactics. The Sheriff's Department has a tactics and training unit throughout the county that they train everybody at, and they send its EASS, Enhanced Active Shooter Strategies now. That's the new title. They went away from active shooter because it doesn't necessarily have to be a shooter. That one of these incidents could be, they could use other weapons. There could be other types of incidents. So.
Right. And I got an opportunity to, about a week ago, to sit in on one of these active shooter response trainings are you familiar with, I believe his name was Sergeant Harding?
Yeah.
Which unit is he with?
He's with TAS. He's with the Tactics and Survival.
Oh, okay. I sat in the training. There was about 200 employees being trained at the Aquatic Center, and they had a handout, and it was just the simple, easy-to-follow instructions on what to do in case of active shooter.
And what are some of the basic top-of-mind things that we ask people to be aware of? Because it's not only preparing for that situation, but you want people to kind of think about having a plan in place if they're going to be in a public place, right? Like, I mean, it's not something you want to find yourself, I need to prepare for this situation now while it's happening, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, the way society is these days, you have to, everywhere you go, have an idea where exits are, at restaurants, at businesses you go to. And think about those things when you go to amusement parks, things like that. You need to be aware of your surroundings and escape plans. Always think, if my family, if something was happening right now, right near me, what would be my escape plan at the time for my family?
So sometimes I hear that when you go into any sort of public place, restaurant, as Deputy Wilkinson was saying, look for the exits. Try to find at least 2 different exits that in case you need to get out, run fast. And an article I was reading, it said something about the first 5 seconds that an active shooter walks into a place. Those are the most crucial, and if you just freeze and you don't know what to do, you're losing precious time.
Yeah, for sure. The initial time when they walk in, and that's going to be the shock factor when somebody goes
Right.
in and you start hearing whether it's
Absolutely.
gunshots or the chaos. You're going to be
It's natural to just
froze
freeze up.
and that kind of thing. So, and that's why we do the training, and we try to get the deputies not to have that same situation when we hear the call on the radio, or we're in an area where, whether it's on duty or off duty, and a situation like this occurs, we know how to act. As far as educating the public on things to do, having a plan ahead of time, knowing when and where to exit to situations like that, and running and evacuating is going to be your main priority at the time.
If you can't find a place to run to, where do you suggest people try to find a place to hide at?
If there's not an exit that you can get to, securing yourself in a locked room, that's going to be your best bet.
Maybe
being
taking
being
heavy.
out of
What if
view.
there's not a lock? Do you just try to find heavy objects and place them in front of the door?
If there's no lock or any way of securing the door or room that you're in, barricading it with furniture, barricading it with chairs, whatever you can do to make it. The longer it takes for the suspect or shooter to engage with you, the more likely they're going to be to find the next easier target. And it gives also law enforcement that crucial time to get to you before any further loss of life.
I've heard the basics kind of explained to it as, and I saw this in the video that was put out by the Sheriff's Department, it's kind of run, hide, fight. There's
Yes.
your 3 main steps, right?
Yes.
What about that? I do want to definitely talk about how to create that strategy plan that you're talking about, as far as top of mind tips. But what are as far as run, hide, fight? I mean, you're essentially saying run is the very first option, and then like Shirley was just alluding to, hide, and then obviously fighting would be a last resort because you're talking about an active shooter situation. But
So fight is a last resort. What does that mean? If there's no way out and the active shooter is in close proximity, then any suggestions on how you would try to defend yourself if you didn't have a weapon?
Anything can become a weapon of some sort in some way. A lot of the businesses have fire extinguishers. There's heavy objects. We've got all these mics that potentially could be weapons if needed. Heavy objects, and that's one of those situations. If you're set in that situation, you need to have that mindset to fight and survive. And sitting there and just waiting for the next bullet to be yours is not the way to do it. Once it's come to that point where it's life or death, and I now have to fight, you have to make that decision, and you have to fight to survive. You have to attack, and
Any
do
particular
everything in your
body
power.
parts that you aim for? Do you aim for the hands where the firearm's being held? Do you aim upper body? Where should people aim at?
If you, and that's all going to be situational depending on
Right.
the type of weapon they're using, the type of weapons or implemented weapons that you have, improvised weapons. It's all going to be situational, but you want to make it to where they can't, whether it's see or fight any further. You want to incapacitate them. Taking one weapon from them or getting one weapon from them doesn't mean that they don't have a second or third or any other kind of IEDs, or you don't know what you're getting into. So
let me go back for a second to just what you had mentioned about making sure you have that plan in place. What types of tips do you tell people if they're considering making the plans? Obviously, you'd mentioned knowing where the exits are. Are there things that people should know for surviving until law enforcement gets on the scene? And then once a law enforcement official arrives on the scene, what should they do? What do they know? How do you know when it's safe?
as far as the planning, waiting for law enforcement. Once you've gotten to a location where you can secure yourself, if that's a possibility at the time, remaining quiet, making sure your cell phones are off, things like that, because typically they're going towards noise, they're going towards the screaming, they're going towards the yelling. Remaining quiet, trying to stay calm, that's going to be the biggest thing is throughout these situations, because you're going to react smarter, you're going to do things a lot smarter.
Should you try to call 911 if you're hiding?
If you're hiding, definitely making a call to 911 when it's safe to do so. If they're standing behind the door and they're going to be hearing you yelling 911, and calling, that might not be the opportune time to do it. Dialing 911 and leaving your phone just sitting there on without communicating with them.
That allows them to track.
That allows them, they can hear what's going on. The dispatchers or whoever's on the other end will be able to hear the type of situation. If it's a landline, they're going to have a location. Typically with cell phones, you might not get an exact location, but the second you're able to put out your location and what exactly is going on, that's going to be the best. And providing the information on the shooter themselves. Descriptions, direction they're going, and that way it all gets relayed to the responding officers.
So once something happens, if people hear gunshots at a place, the first thing they obviously should do is run, but is there anything else they should be aware of as far as outside of the exits that, maybe like things to note in their environment? Yeah.
Definitely if a lot of times, especially nowadays, they're using these IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So odd objects, pipe bombs are kind of a thing that everybody's familiar with as far as something that's talked about more on the media and everything. If you see something that looks suspicious, obviously try to avoid that. If you're coming up to an exit door and there's wires and things that look very suspicious, maybe that exit's not the one you want to go to. And relaying that information to law enforcement if you do get the opportunity to call 911, letting them know, because they might be coming in through a different exit than or the main entrance. So those are things to note as well.
Right. And I wanted to switch over to Deputy Pete Romo, who is one of our school resource deputies.
Hi.
Now, hello, how are you today?
I'm good,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming in. School's out for the summer.
It is out.
Yes. Well, we're going to be taking a break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you about what your role is if there should be a crisis such as this that occurs on campus.
Okay.
And we'll be right back after this on SCV Sheriff Talk, brought to you by All American Bail Bonds on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back, Santa Clarita Valley. We're here on SCV Sheriff Talk with my co-host, Shirley Miller. This is KHTS News Director Perry Smith, and in the studio with us today, Deputy Rob Wilkinson, Deputy Pete Romo, and Dr. Janet Steyer, all talking to us about active shooter response in light of the Orlando shooter tragedy that recently happened last week. And so we want to talk a little bit about what happened, or what happens rather, when you guys, Deputy Romo, you're a responder, or you would be in that type of situation, and you work with Valencia High School in Rio Norte to get our children kind of prepared and for that kind of a situation, and work with school staff to make sure they're prepared for that kind of situation as well, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about that process and how the Hart District works with the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff Station to keep our schools safe?
Sure. During the school year, we hold at least 2 drills at each campus, active shooter drills, where we do lockdowns. The students kind of get exposure as to what alerts they're going to hear during an active shooter situation.
So, and what types of things are they looking for? And I mean, there's going to be, I'm guessing, over the loud system. But.
Well, primarily what we look for is to make sure that the students, number one, take it serious, and two, respond appropriately. We want them to find a place to hide. We want them to run, get behind a locked door, barricade rooms, things of that nature.
And I'll also imagine it's really helpful for staff, too, to have that plan and to have that plan in place. What kind of advice do you give to teachers and counselors, administration, when you're dealing with that kind of a situation?
The main thing, I think, is, number one, to get the kids to safety, help them to remain calm. We have had kids that it affects them a little more than others. They get very emotional, even though they know it's a drill. So it's good practice for them. They get to see and know what to expect when kids go through this kind of a situation.
And we were just kind of talking about it at the break. There's nothing really that you can tell yourself or try to pretend what happens when an actual shooter comes on campus. But these drills are actually helpful in just kind of preparing them mentally, right? I mean, that's what you kind of try to get them in the mindset for, just in case.
Yeah, and to obviously one of the first things we want to do is help them to remain calm, which is going to be difficult in a situation like this. But if you go through scenarios mentally to kind of prepare yourself for an active shooter, then it actually will help you in the future to remain calm if it does happen. And I mean, we talked about breathing during the break too, so that helps too. Just try to
just kind of slow it down, take deep breaths, catch yourself, and
calm.
Kind of not panic, right? Because, another thing Deputy Wilkins say, the run, hide, fight thing is not necessarily a standard thing. These are fluid situations, and so you kind of have to be mentally ready just in case you have to run, then hide, then run, and then do that again, right?
Yeah, and if there's multiple suspects, you might end up in a fight situation and now a run situation, or a fight and then locking yourself back down, hiding again, depending on the number of shooters or whatever the situation is.
And Deputy Romo, if there should be an active shooter situation on the campus, what is your role? You act as a first responder to the scene, correct?
Correct. My role, being on campus, is to seek out the threat. We need to find the threat and remove it. And then we have additional resources coming. Obviously, we alert them as to how many shooters, and pretty much the same information that anyone would give over 911 is what I'm going to be relaying to my fellow deputies responding to the scene.
In those types of training situations, Jess, I would imagine the real challenge is communication and information. At that point, is that really what you guys are practicing the most, or as far as preparing for, on top of those other things you mentioned?
Right. Communication and tactics, knowing how to move throughout the campus in a safe manner, and obviously our first and foremost, we want to take out the threat.
Now, something that I was talking to you a few minutes ago, Perry, if someone is in that situation and you see deputies arrive on scene, your first instinct is to run towards them for help and safety. And what advice can you give us to people about how to safely approach the deputy in a situation?
As far as approaching, you probably don't want to approach unless you're going to give information as to where the shooter's gone. If you're in a room, best to just wait. Deputies will get to you eventually to put you in a safe place.
Right, and it also could put you in a potentially dangerous situation because at that point maybe they haven't identified who the active shooter is, and they say to put your hands up in the air when you're evacuating.
Right. Don't have any items on you. Just keep your hands where the deputies can see them.
Yeah, make sure your hands are empty. We're going to be arriving, or law enforcement's going to be arriving, and not know exactly what we're looking for, how many we're looking for. We don't know that the one
and
that's
at that
being
point,
called on.
Is a suspect.
So everybody
yes.
at that point is really a potential threat. Mm-hmm. So I'm making sure don't go running towards the deputies. Don't have anything in your hand. No matter, that's part of trying to keep calm. There's going to be a sense of relief, I'm sure, when you see law enforcement there, and that feel that safety. We don't know who you are until we've contacted you. So, and yelling and screaming, don't yell and scream. Put your hands up. Make sure that it's very obvious that you're not a threat, and then listen to the directions given to you. Don't question. Don't just if a law enforcement officer, deputy tells you, start walking, hands in the air, go back, come out, walk out towards where I just came from, or whatever direction they give you. Just follow that direction. Don't become more of a problem in the situation, because we're going to be heightened. Our stress level is going to be heightened. We don't need to sit and argue and bicker with somebody who wants to carry on.
And that was a really interesting point because, as a civilian, you don't think about the stress level. Obviously, if someone's responding, you're thinking about your relief. And Deputy Sellers brought up that point when I was asking about that kind of stuff. Is like, put your purse down, put your backpack down. You can get it later. You don't need to run at an officer deputy who's trying to clear a scene with a bag in your hand when they don't know what's going on. So that's, I think, a really good, important point. And Dr. Steyer, we want to talk a little bit about what can we tell teachers, and also, very importantly, what can we tell children? And you had mentioned some interesting things when we were talking about this, as far as, for smaller children, it's a different conversation based on their age group, I would imagine.
Correct. I think the first thing might be to help teachers be prepared to go through some practices and exercises as part of the drills. So, all right, we're on lockdown. That means we're closing the blinds and we're locking the doors. And what can we do now? Like, let's go through some breathing exercises. Let's discuss something that's fun, or visualize the beach, or ways to calm down, so that that's a practice and something that they're able to do. And there are ways to actually practice deep breathing. So you can find certainly plenty of things online, but there's exercises we can do to help people calm, and it's good for the teachers as well, so they can lead it along with the children.
And you had mentioned doing some consulting with the local school districts. So
Yes.
what do you talk to the elementary schools districts about?
I think this particular element could be something that we cover. We haven't yet, but we have discussed it as maybe something to offer for the schools that have experienced more lockdowns this year than others, elementary schools. So what exercises can we offer? Just a one-page sheet for the teachers to pull out on the day that they know they're going to have the drill.
Okay.
And then on days where it's not a drill anymore, this is for real, but we can still take out these exercises and let's do something. And it offers everyone something to do at that time, which I think is also calming, as long as they're not distracted from what they, listening to the police as well.
Too.
Yes.
I mean, when you have just any small group of children, even without the distraction of a major incident like that. One thing also, again, looking at how children process that, as a parent, how do you talk to them about the Orlando shooting, or when you see these incidents that are, unfortunately happening frequent enough that they're on the news regularly?
Right. So we had mentioned developmentally appropriate discussions. So the way that you're going to talk to your preschooler is going to be very different from the way that you talk to a high school student. Preschoolers don't really need to know.
Sure.
If we're able to shelter them from the media at that time, I think that's the most useful thing. If they ask questions, though, we want to make sure that they are feeling welcome to talk and express any emotions they have or any questions they have. Preschoolers can come up with some very goofy questions, so stay on their level, and answer, what they may know or what they may have seen, even if we didn't want them to see it on TV.
Well, and that has to be the challenge as far as a parent, I would imagine, being a gatekeeper when there's so many media outlets out there. There's so many ways, and there's so many, kids have cell phones and they talk to kids on the schoolyard. So if your child starts asking those questions, how do you kind of steer the conversation towards something that's appropriate manner?
So this would be children who are a little bit older than preschool, we hope, elementary, middle school, high school. I think we first want to focus on safety, because a lot of them are thinking about that at that point. Children think about themselves first and foremost, which is fine and what we expect from them. So I think that first we want to say we have these wonderful people ready to act, and we have these plans, as this show showed today, that there are plans ready for things that happen, and our goal is to keep you safe. And we're going to do a pretty good job of it. We're fairly certain of that. I think having that reassurance is usually what they're looking for in their questioning. Beyond that, simple, factual, being aware of the emotions that are being expressed, and being open and calm. I think if the parent is able to keep himself or herself calm, then the children are going to follow along as well.
And at what age does the conversation become a little more factual, as opposed to just worrying about their confidence and their mentality in that situation?
Right. I think it's more about the developmental level of your particular child.
Okay.
But I would say 9 to 10 and on is that they're ready to start discussing a little bit more about what is going on in the world, and why are these things happening now, and is everything evil and challenging, or am I going to be okay? But you can discuss bigger topics as they get older. And
so that would be about 3rd, 4th grade. They're starting to. I mean, a lot of them have cell phones anyways, or
right.
Or social
so
media, or right.
We have to be aware of what they have access to.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? We want to make sure that parents, students, kids residents know about active shooting situation. There is resources available on the Sheriff's Department website and the Sheriff's SCV Sheriff. You've tweeted out through the
Right.
SCV Sheriff account some information, and I know there's a video called Active Shooter.
Right. If you go to www.activeshooter.lasd.org, you can view the video that
And-
we've been talking about today.
And it was produced professionally. It's very informative, and it has a lot of good information. So I would definitely recommend that. There's a sheet or some sort of contact sheet that if somebody wants to ask a question about that kind of training or contact the station, is there a number they should call? Should they just call the generic station line?
Well, they're welcome to anyone who's listening and has a question. They can email us at Santa Clarita Media at lasd.org. Santa Clarita Media at lasd.org, and then we'll try to direct you to the appropriate person.
Awesome. And Dr. Janet, I also want to congratulate the SCV Child and Family Center on 40 years of operation and being a great resource for this community. You guys are celebrating that on Friday?
Thank you. Yes, we are.
So congratulations there. Thank you for your time today. My guests, Deputy Wilkinson, Deputy Romo, Dr. Steyer.
Yeah, thanks
my
for coming
co-host,
by.
for having us.
Thank you
Officer
very
Miller.
much.
This has been great. SCV Sheriff Talk will be on YouTube and our Facebook page if you want to get that information. Brought to you by All American Bail Bonds on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS.